Hi, I'm Matt Bufford with Capnos Knives. I've had a lot of video requests for a series of my method for making a knife, basically. I'm going to start from the very beginning. You start with a knife design. What I've come up with here is a one-off of my basic bushcraft design, which has gotten extraordinarily popular. So essentially I did some modifications to the design, traced it back out. Now I'm just going to cut it out, I'm going to glue it to the bar, and I'm going to show you in this video how to profile it. Stay tuned in the following videos. We'll be moving beyond the profiling into the grinding, sanding, the handling and the finishing, and even making the sheath. Everything from beginning to end on this knife is going to be in this video series. So go ahead and subscribe now and stay tuned. Alright, so we're going to glue it up now that I've got it all cut out from the pattern design. All I use is a general purpose spray adhesive from 3M. Any kind of spray adhesive or even a glue stick will work if that's all you can get your hands on. Some people like to use different methods using the layout fluid for metals. Whatever your method of getting your pattern onto your metal doesn't matter. It's just a matter of getting it on there in one way or another so you can use that as your template. But my method, I found it's easier for me. I'm just going to spray it on there. After the glue dries a little bit, then I'll stick it onto the metal and I'll let it dry before I start doing anything. Okay, so now I've got it glued onto my metal stock. What I like to use is an Elmax stainless steel. There's many different metals available for knife making. Elmax is just the one I prefer. You can use a carbon steel, you can use a 440 stainless steel, you can use a D2 tool steel if you like, but Elmax is just one that I've preferred out of all the testing, all the knives I've made. I like its characteristics, I like its hardness, and I like its durability, and I like its finish. So that being said, I pretty much work exclusively with Elmax, but this is a .236 thickness bar, so it's almost a 1/4 inch thick. So this knife is going to be a bit thicker than most knives you might end up making, but with all the designs I'm putting into this knife, it'll kind of make sense once it's getting closer to done. Okay, so now we're ready to cut it out. I've got it glued up and it's been drying for 15-20 minutes, so it's not moving anywhere, which is pretty important. And you want to be careful while you're cutting not to really put too much pressure on the actual pattern, because you could end up bunching it up, tearing it, whatever. As the metal heats up from the saw blade, it'll start loosening that glue a little bit. So just be careful of that. But first, I'll cut it off the bar, and then I'll make my cuts all the way around the perimeter just to get it off. I'm not going to bother you with watching me cut the whole thing out, but you'll get a good idea of how I'm doing it. So as you can see, I've gone through here and I've made several cuts along the profile of the knife. What that's going to do is, as I cut along, it's going to let me break it off piece by piece, making it a lot easier for me to follow the contours of all the profile. As far as where you make those cuts, basically the guide I follow is anywhere you have a more drastic curve or angle change, you're going to need a lot more closer together, because when you're considering the width of the actual saw blade, you can't make a whole lot of tight corners, so you got to back up and reposition several times. So having those shorter cuts makes it a lot easier for you to get around those tight angles. So that being that, I'm just going to follow along, staying out of lines like I'm in a coloring book. Okay, so as you can see, we've got it mostly cut out on the bandsaw. The one thing to take notice of, you can see several spots where there's just a little bit of metal sticking out from the pattern. If you've only got 1 or 2 times the width of the bandsaw blade, it really isn't worth taking your time to cut that line, because we can just as easily and even quicker take it off with the grinder. So our next step is going to be to go to the grinder, finish off the entire profile of the blade, then we'll get the pattern off, and the profiling will be done at that point. After that, we'll get to drilling the holes, and this one particularly, I'll be making a channel in the tang, and after that, we'll be ready for the beveling. So we're almost done with this profile. And next up is the grinder. Okay, so here we are at the grinder to finish up the profiling. For this part, I use a pretty worn out old 60 grit belt. Now the belts aren't exactly cheap when you use as many as a lot of us do. So I like to use the worn out one for the big reason that I don't really want to take away a lot of the metal off of the profile of the knife. I just basically want to smooth out and get rid of all my blade marks from the bandsaw. So now you can see that the profile essentially matches up with the lines on the pattern. And if you look around at the edge of the blade, it's all smoothed out, no more saw marks or everything. And this is essentially our basic starting point for our knife. Once we've got it profiled out, we're ready to start building our knife. Next, I'm going to use some acetone solution, and I'm just going to dribble it on there a little bit. The glue should release fairly quickly, and you should be able to peel it off just with your fingers. And once you get that peeled off and thrown away, you've got your knife blank. Scrub it down a little bit more with some acetone to get the residual glue off, because it's still somewhat sticky. But a little bit more acetone, a little scrub, and it'll be ready to punch some holes and start working on beveling.